Namaste. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Creeson Agecoutay. Thank you for joining us. Canada's Supreme Court says the Crown has dishonourably breached the Robinson treaties and now must negotiate a settlement with several First Nations in Ontario within 6 months. The Robinson-Huron plaintiffs had already reached a negotiated settlement of $10 billion, but the Robinson Superior had continued their lawsuit. The two treaties were signed in 1850. They involved ceding a large swath of land in Ontario to the Crown in return for annual payments to the Anishinaabe of Lake Huron and Lake Superior. Annuities were to increase over time so as long as the Crown did not incur a loss. But since 1875, that payment was frozen at $4 a person. The Supreme Court says that if a deal cannot be reached between the Crown and the Robinson Superior plaintiffs within 6 months, the Crown must set a remedy of its own. Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond is a former judge and Order of Canada recipient. She was accused of falsely claiming to be Cree, but according to the Law Society of British Columbia and a recent DNA test, she is most likely has Indigenous heritage. 2 years ago, CBC News investigated her Indigenous identity and called into question of claims her father was Cree. Both the Law Society and an independent geneticist says in a recent report that Turpel-Lafond has very recent ancestors with substantial Indigenous DNA. The report also notes Turpel-Lafond misrepresented some of her credentials and has been ordered to pay $10,000 to a nonprofit organization that supports Indigenous justice. Turpel-Lafond previously served as British Columbia's representative for children and youth. She is also a well-known lawyer and advocate on Indigenous rights. The Alberta wildfire that hit the townsite of Jasper this week has destroyed a third to possibly half of all buildings in the popular tourist destination, according to Alberta's premier. Cooler weather and up to 15 millimeters of rain has somewhat calmed the fires right now, but higher temperatures this weekend may increase fire activity. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Images began showing up online last night of the damage done to the picturesque town of Jasper, Alberta. Buildings, hotels, and houses are seen on fire. The wildfire reached 300 to 400 feet in height. 25,000 people were evacuated earlier this week as the fire approached. Videos this morning on social media showed charred businesses, cars, and houses showing extensive damage. This afternoon, an emotional Danielle Smith said up to half the town has been destroyed.
Homes and businesses have been lost to a wildfire that people are calling a wall of flames. There is no denying that this is the worst nightmare for any community. To the residents of Jasper and those displaced far from home looking at the images of your town on TV and online, the feelings of loss and fear and loneliness must be overwhelming. But you are not alone. All Albertans are with you.
The Premier also made a promise to the community.
To the residents, families, and business owners who call Jasper home, we will recover from this. To the men and women on the front line and at all operational levels, thank you for your courage and commitment. And to those in Alberta and around the world who have experienced the magic of Jasper, the magic is not lost and it never will be. Alberta's government will provide the support needed to families and community to recover and to rebuild stronger than ever.
Relief may be on the way for the beleaguered town as heavy rainfall is expected, which will help firefighting efforts. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
On Thursday morning, the Senate released a new report called Missing Records, Missing Children. Its goal is to get the government to provide better and more timely access to residential school records. They may contain key information about the lives and deaths of Indigenous children at those schools. Fraser Needham has more.
Senator Brian Francis is the chair of the Senate's Committee on Indigenous Peoples. He says there are a number of reasons why survivors and the public at large are not able to access residential school records in the manner they should.
There's lack of human resources to do the job and lack of financial resources to do the job properly. Those are critical areas that have to be covered off in order for this work to take place, because as I mentioned earlier, the wrecks are scattered out across Canada, very little information on them. It's going to take some deep dive into them to get the proper information out. So it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of coordination to bring this about properly.
The Senate committee interviewed dozens of witnesses over the past several months, which resulted in missing records of missing children. The report makes 11 recommendations, including calling on the government to compel the Catholic Church to release records to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, or NCTR, fund Indigenous-led approaches to locating records, and adequately fund the Residential Schools Documents Advisory Committee to assist in locating and transferring records to the NCTR. Francis says it is particularly important that accessing and transferring documents be led by Indigenous institutions, such as the NCTR.
We know how to do the work. There are people. We know what has to be done. We know how to interview our survivors properly and so on. And I think it's just critical that we lead it as Indigenous people.
In an emailed statement, the NCTR fully supports all of the report's recommendations, particularly with respect to the transfer and release of residential school records into its care. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The Indian Brotherhood of the Northwest Territories was established in 1969, and ever since they have had a leader. This week, it's time to choose the next national chief for the Dene Nation. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us that story.
There's a record number of candidates vying for national chief of the Dene Nation. Usually there's only 2 candidates, so typically a single vote elects the leader. But with 6 candidates, the rules have been altered, and the winner must nab 51% majority of the ballots cast. Despite skepticism to change the Constitution, delegates gave it the green light. Speeches began with former National Chief Norman Yakalula of Toledo, who once served as MLA in the territories.
When I was an MLA and I thought I knew everything, I was going to change the world as an MLA for the Sawtoo. Because I saw the injustice going on in our communities, with the housing, the education. We got to put the government in the Northwest Territories on notice. You're no longer going to be around once we get our act together as a nation.
Next, Katlodiche First Nation Chief April Martel talked about tackling the addictions issues in the NWT.
And we also need to make the RCMP responsible to help us and assist us in the communities when it comes to drug dealing, when it comes to eviction of drug dealers in our communities. We have BCRs that we evict our drug dealers, but we need to push the RCMP to assist in taking those drug dealers out and improving our justice system in the communities and our victim services. We have too many victims in our small communities.
Incumbent Gerald Antoine is a veteran politician who served as Grand Chief of the Deitcho First Nations. He gave this emotional reflection on his time in office.
I saw the machinery and the moving parts in your communities, in the region, here at Dene Nation, and at the national level. I see that you're not into that.
Meanwhile, former Satu MLA Paulichina of Fort Good Hope spoke towards her 2 decades working for the territorial government.
But I feel that we are not recognized as strongly as we should be. I feel that our people in the smaller communities are not treated with adequate housing, with adequate services when it also comes to mental health. I think that as Dene Nation, as Dene Day, why can't we take over those services? Why can't we administer it? And why aren't we at the table and accessing further funding through AFN?
Former Clincho Grand Chief George McKenzie says more needs to be done to get students to graduate.
We got to find a way for the teachers to stay longer in our communities. And one way that we did it is we took the teachers out on the land on weekends volunteer work we did. We didn't get paid for it. Because of that, some teachers stayed for 7 years. Even one teacher stayed for 14 years.
Finally, former Smith's Landing First Nation Chief Jerry Cheesy of Fort Smith wants to further the distance between the Dene Nation and the GNWT.
They have proven to be ineffective in just about every aspect of our lives. They have an annual budget of $2.2 billion. Does any of that money go into your communities? Very little. Why are we, the owners of the land, beggars in our own homeland?
Results are scheduled to be announced no later than 8 p.m. Thursday night, which will be followed by a swearing-in ceremony. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Dene.
To Saskatchewan now, where a new water treatment plant in the Star Blanket Cree Nation has lifted a 17-year-long boil water advisory. CTV's Haley Mandrick has more.
It's a day residents of Star Blanket Cree Nation have been waiting for 17 years.
Some people have grown up never knowing what clean water is like, to come out of your taps, to be able to trust to drink, to be able to trust to wash with.
The long-term water advisory has been lifted thanks to completion of a new water treatment plant, a $10.5 million project using biological filtration and membrane treatment, servicing approximately 300 area residents.
It gives you life, and that's part of our our energies, if you will, our natural laws, if you will, of our land, and it's very significant that we are part of it, and that we are able to say that yes, you can drink the water now.
The plant, made possible through federal funding, will provide safe, clean drinking water to 113 homes. The federal Indigenous Services Minister was on hand to tour the facility now that everything is up and running.
To be in a community that's struggled so tremendously without really great representation from their federal officials, to celebrate with them, to conduct this lift is really heartwarming.
Chief Starr explains that it may take some time for residents to feel comfortable using the water after such a long advisory period. It's a major milestone for this community, but there's still a lot of work to be done for other Indigenous communities under long-term water advisories.
Other communities can see that, and they can further, what they're doing inside of their communities, further advocate, further even build eventually new facilities, new water treatment plant facilities in their communities.
As of July 2024, there are 31 active long-term drinking water advisories on Canadian reserves. Hallie Mandrick, CTV News, Star Blanket.
Ojibway speakers are sharing their language on the classic Star Wars movie, A New Hope. We'll tell you more in about 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. The adoptee experience is taking center stage in a play called Agency, debuting at the Winnipeg Fringe Festival. Reporter Sierra Betton sat down with actors Renetta McCons and Cynthia Wolfe-Nolan, who play a mother and daughter impacted by the 60 scoop.
At the Winnipeg Fringe Festival, a new play takes conversations about the child welfare system outside the courtroom and on to the stage. Titled Agency, it follows 3 adoptees: a British home child from the 1910s, a Korean child adopted in the 90s, and a 60s scoop survivor adopted in the 70s. It was created by playwright Barb Janes and directed by Marcia Knight. Actor Cynthia Wolfe-Nolan plays an Anishinaabe adoptee named Claire. For Wolfe-Nolan, who grew up in the child welfare system, the story is deeply personal.
This play itself actually sort of talks about that. We claim that we've made all these huge leaps with the child and welfare system, but in fact, being one of those children in the child and welfare system, yes, I was privy to a lot of good things, in life, and at the same time, how far have we actually come? We still have lots of children in care.
Throughout the play, Claire navigates the maze of the child welfare system, longing to reconnect with her mother Marlene, played by Renata McCons.
But it also shows the perspectives and stories of the adoptive mothers and the birth mothers, and It really is multifaceted, and using the analogy of the maze is how the story is told.
Manitoba, where the play is debuting, has the highest rate of children in foster care in Canada. Meekons, who comes from the Penebatang First Nation, describes the adoptee experience as the play's uniting force, connecting different backgrounds to a shared experience.
I know just from hearing some of the feedback from some of the people that have seen the play that, it touched them. It made them very emotional. It does bring experiences to life that are close to us.
While she won't drop too many spoilers, Wolf Nolan hints at breaking the fourth wall, urging the audience to continue the conversation about the child welfare system.
I do break the wall at the end, and it's a big question that is presented, and that's where it lies. It's the same thing from the beginning, but now it's given back to the audience to decide.
Agency plays at the Jasper Centre for Theatre and Film at the University of Winnipeg until Saturday. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
This next story is for all you Star Wars fans out there. An Ojibway elder and veteran is helping to bring the Ojibway language to the Star Wars classic A New Hope. CTV's Molly Fromer has more.
Jeff Moneg, former chief of the Beausoleil First Nation on Christian Island, is now voicing the part of Grand Moff Tarkin in the new Ojibway version of Star Wars, A New Hope. Although he has been a voice actor for various skits in the past, he says this role hits differently.
It was nice to be able to do this in my language. It's the first time I was ever able to do voice acting in my own language. So that was a draw for me. I really enjoyed that. And for a series like Star Wars, that's a huge thing.
Moneg says being part of this movie was like being part of history.
There are very few productions that are done in the Ojibway language entirely. And you had probably about 75% of the people working on it were Indigenous people. So it's really nice to be in the studio, to be in that setting with all of your brothers and sisters, and to experience this thing together.
In Manitoba, Moneg says a different dialect is used, which he had to learn before heading to the audition.
I speak Ojibway, and I speak the dialect of this region, so I had to learn the Western dialect, which is what they use out in Manitoba. I went into the studios, I was given 9 hours, and I did my part in 6 hours, so I think I did pretty good.
Moneg calls himself a Star Wars geek.
I could call myself that because I've seen everything there is of Star Wars, including the last segment that was on Disney Plus. I'm drawn to that connection and the idea of the Force being in all of us and in everything around us.
The movie will air in Manitoba on August 8th. Moneg says following that, the movie will air on APTN and Disney Plus. Molly Fromer, CTV News, Barrie.
Love it. Manitoba has recently recognized 12 Manitobans who have gone above and beyond for the community. We'll tell you all about the Indigenous recipients when we come back. Over on the east, St. John 17, Charlottetown 21. The Grand River 12, Anujuak 10. Saguenay 22, Val-d'Or 18. Toronto 23, Sault Ste. Marie 16. Timmins 24, Big Trout Lake 20. Puckatawagan 21, God's Lake 22. Winnipeg 24, Barons River 23. Saskatoon 17, Regina 18. Buffalo Narrows 12, Stony Rapids 19. Grand Prairie 15, Fort McMurray 14. Lethbridge 25, 13 in Edmonton. Campbell River 14, Quesnel 12. Dease Lake 10, Prince George 12. Dawson 14, Old Crow 13. Yellowknife 19, Norman Wells 22. Inuvik 23, Colville Lake 22 there. Baker Lake 17, Cambridge Bay 9. Iqaluit 9, Arctic Bay 6. The Order of Manitoba will be bestowed onto 12 accomplished Manitobans, 3 of whom are Indigenous. Sav Jones has more on who and why they're being honored.
12 Manitobans are the latest inductees into the Order of Manitoba. Those selected are being recognized with the province's highest honor for their positive contributions to the social, cultural, and economic well-being of Manitoba and its residents. 3 of the recipients are Indigenous and have made their mark on various sectors in the province. The Honourable Murray Sinclair, who also goes by Mijana Gijek, will be recognized for his work as a lawyer, a judge, and a Canadian senator. The Anishinaabe man is well known as Manitoba's first Indigenous judge in 1988 and as the chair for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Métis Saulteaux elder May Louise Campbell will receive the Order of Manitoba for her many decades of work in the Indigenous community and Canada as a whole. Elder Campbell has used her heart and traditional knowledge to help Manitobans struggling with addictions, the justice system, and also sex trafficking victims to learn how to heal. And Cree Anishinaabe Dr. Marcia Anderson will be honored for her expertise in medicine and advocacy for the betterment of healthcare services for Indigenous people. As a medical officer and vice dean, Dr. Anderson has taught countless others about the importance of barrier-free healthcare. Congratulations to the honorees and thank you for your lasting impact. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It was an exciting week in the community of Six Nations of the Grand River. Fans and community members gathered in Ilshwekin to welcome home one of their own with the Stanley Cup. Here's Annette Francis with more highlights.
Wearing Florida Panther shirts and carrying signs, fans filled the streets of Washwegan, cheering on defenseman Brandon Montour as he made his way through the main street of his hometown.
Go Brandon!
The streets were shut down to traffic all day in anticipation of the large crowds. There were thousands who stood in line to get into the Washwegan Arena.
It's nice that he won the cup. I was kind of hoping he would win it, especially in the finals there. So, just nice to see somebody win.
They waited hours as they weaved around barricades. For Liz Beachy, whose son used to play minor hockey with Montour, it's well worth the wait.
We've been following Brandon's career the whole time, and we're very proud of him. He's an awesome guy, awesome kid, awesome family, and we're happy to be here.
The fans that made it inside had an opportunity to get a photo with Montour and the cup. Montour said he's happy to spend the day with family and friends in his community. He said life has been hectic, especially since signing to play with Seattle Kraken next season.
Last season was a little different. Last season, obviously, we went all the way. I had shoulder surgery, so I was, doing rehab all the way till training camp, and this year is different just because, I had to find a new team to play. So to be able to, move everything from Florida. We're going to Seattle, my wife and I, this weekend to go find a place.
No matter what team Montour plays with, the fans here say they'll support and follow him. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Six Nations of the Grand River.
Thank you, Annette, for making the long trip from Ottawa for that story. And that's your midday newscast for this Friday, July 26th. Dennis Ward will be here for your evening national newscast in a few hours. Make sure to join us again. From everyone here at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next Monday.